Welcome to Awesome Movie Year, the podcast where we take a look back at an awesome year for movies, which is every year. My name is Josh Bell, film critic and writer, and I am joined by my co-host.
I'm Jason Harris, filmmaker, comedian, and intern for whatever story you're working on there, fella.
Thank you. I'm going to have you do all the work for this episode while I go look up my ex-girlfriend and act really sleazy around her.
That's
the plan.
Make sure you think that she's old and fat and then be like, oh, there's more to life than just thinking that. And I'll be out there just doing the work for you, good buddy. We'll get a good article out of it.
Yeah, probably not. I don't think they ever even wrote an article in this movie. Anyway, what is happening? We are here at the season finale already. It always feels like it goes so quickly of our season on the films of 2012. And as we always do for the final episode, we are giving you the choice, our listeners, of what movie to talk about. We come up with a little theme and put it out to our listeners. And for 2012, our theme was Mark Duplass, the indie sensation who really was blowing up this year. We had 3 Mark Duplass related films that we could have talked about. Jeff Who Lives at Home, which he co-directed with his brother Jay Duplass. Your Sister's Sister from director Lynn Shelton. And the movie that you all chose, which is Safety Not Guaranteed, the debut of somewhat contentious director Colin Trevorrow, starring Mark Duplass, Aubrey Plaza, Jake Johnson, and Karan Soni, inspired by a real-life classified ad that was a joke ad placed in a magazine called Backwoods Home in 1997. And that became it sounds like it became like one of the earliest internet memes, because it wasn't until 10 years later that it had been circulating for all this time. And Derek Connolly, the screenwriter of this film, came upon it and used it as a starting point for speculating about what kind of person might write this ad looking for a partner to time travel.
Yeah, so a few things right off the bat, like the guy who put the ad in was like, oh, it was clearly a joke because I put other ads in with the same address and I figured everyone would just piece it together, wink, wink, you know, that was what was going on. And it was no one seemed to get it. But that ad became so famous, right? Like they talked about it on the Tonight Show, right? You know, Jay Leno was all like, hey, you want to see an ad? They're a little crazy.
Was it on headlines? I used to love headlines. I will admit, I used to love it.
I did time travel. Look like this guy needs to time travel back to see a doctor. Coming up later, Leanne Rimes will be out. Anyway, Josh, what's more important though is that we have to let the audience know you are all on probation right now. We gave you 2 really, really great choices and Safety Not Guaranteed, and you chose Safety Not Guaranteed. If this was an international football league, you would be on the verge of relegation. So
that's a metaphor we all understand.
You would be dropping down a league to listen. You would only be able to listen to lesser podcasts like Piecing It Together, and you would have to earn your way back into Awesome Movie Year. But it's not. It's just probation, guys. So really take that into consideration.
Yeah, I feel like this is at least the second time we've had this where we collectively have been rooting against the choice that we ended up with. But yeah, I agree. And I think, fair warning to all the people who voted for this, who presumably like this movie, we're not going to have a lot of positive things to say in this episode about this film. But Jeff Who Lives at Home and Your Sister's Sister, really good films that you should check out. Watch those and then reflect on your choices.
Yeah. Josh, which were you rooting for?
I was really rooting more for Your Sister's Sister because I thought it would be interesting to talk about Lynn Shelton and her whole career. But I mean, I think though they're both really good. I'm pretty sure Jeff Who Lives at Home was on my top 10 list for the year when I made it in 2012. So I would have been curious to revisit that. So, maybe someday we'll get the chance to do that.
I too would love for us to talk about Lynn Shelton, who cameos in this film, as a matter of fact. I like that movie a lot, and I love the setting in Your Sister's Sister. And I think like Emily Blunt is really just, that's to me maybe her star-making performance, right? Mm-hmm. Which is really good in that. But I think I would have liked Jeff Who Lives at Home as my choice, just because I don't think I've seen that since the theater, and I know I really liked it. And I had seen Your Sister's Sister again, so that would have been my choice. But instead, I went in with an open mind, saying like, "Did I miss something here in Safety Not Guaranteed?" And the answer is no, no, I did not.
I kind of felt the same. Maybe I'll like this a little more. And in fact, the opposite thing happened. But we should say, are in the minority, not only compared to our listeners, but compared to most people when this film came out. It premiered at the 2012 Sundance Film Festival, where it won the Waldo Salt Screenwriting Award for Derek Connolly. It then went on to be a pretty decent box office success for a small indie film. It grossed $4.4 million on its budget of just $750,000. It was on critics' top 10 lists. At the Independent Spirit Awards, it was nominated for Best First Feature, and it won Best First Screenplay. I think it has something like a 91% on Rotten Tomatoes still, with, any reviews that have accumulated since then. So this is a movie that was generally quite well liked by most people but us.
So, what we always say at the end via, hit us up on social media and tell us why we're wrong. But like, I'm going to say it at the beginning. If you voted for this or you really like this movie, let us know where we are failing you.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's, I look forward to hearing that. So, right. So critics, I was even looking to try and find some slight negativity, which I'll get to. But starting out, critics were generally very positive about this film. Roger Ebert said, "Few descriptions of Safety Not Guaranteed will do it justice. It's a more ambitious and touching movie than seems possible, given its starting point. It is a comedy in many ways, but there's a serious undertow, kind-hearted attention to the characters, and a treatment of time travel that A, takes it seriously, and B, sidesteps all of the well-known paradoxes by which time travel is impossible. Safety Not Guaranteed not only has dialogue that's about something, but characters who have some depth and dimension. Mark Duplass has all of a sudden emerged as an engaging actor with real presence. This is really his movie. The role is borderline impossible, and he carries it."
Well, it's interesting because they're like, Safety Not Guaranteed takes time travel seriously, but it seems to be like, if not, I don't want to say making fun of the lead character, but at least showing that there is some need for some mental help, let's say, there is. There's certain mental illness. Not to say you can't create a time machine, just if you're mentally ill, maybe it helps. But so I don't know, if I'm like, oh, it takes everything like on the level, or it felt like. Did it feel like it was poking fun at the lead character a little to you, Josh?
I feel like it should have poked more fun at the lead character, because part of the problem with this movie is that it's like, oh, like it wants to have it both ways. Like, you're right, Jason, the guy is clearly mentally ill, but it wants to treat it as like, oh, he's quirky and let's have this romance, which I never for a second bought into. The romance between Mark Duplass's character and Aubrey Plaza's character, the intern at the magazine who does all the work. And so I think it's trying not to. It's trying to be very sensitive to this guy, and the idea that like, oh, people, in the context of the movie, people are poking fun at him because he's a weirdo. But, he's really just sensitive and misunderstood. But it's like, no, he's not really just sensitive and misunderstood. He's got he's severely disturbed and needs some help. And yeah, and the whole time travel thing of it just feels like a pretext, except, when we get to the very, very end, and it felt like Colin Trevorrow at the end was like, I got to do some special effects thing here because I want to get a job making a special effects movie. So here's some little effects bit right at the very end of this film. And I don't know, the ending super annoyed me as well. So
yeah. I personally, I could buy into the first kiss between those two characters. But then when all these like revelations come to pass, and like then she still like is like, I still have a crush on this guy, like, or I'm not worried about him. That to me is it lost me there. I had read they did have a different original ending, and then Trevorrow felt flat, and then that's why he reshot the more fantastical ending.
And who knows, maybe that would have been worse. But yeah, I definitely think where you have this big, what's meant to be kind of this triumphant moment at the end where she's like, yes, I'm still all on board. It's like, no, I don't believe it. And also you are wrong. So
yeah, there was
that,
like, hey, like let's take a step back and talk this out, and we'll find out a plan, and we can really dig into this and work on you.
yeah, but other people seem to have been really swept up in this. So Kenneth Turan in the Los Angeles Times said, "It is one of the great classified ads of our time, and it leads to an unexpected and endearing film that is as deliciously off-center as the words that ignite it. The film is safety not guaranteed, and its success is both delightful and unlikely. As sweet as it is eccentric, and it is wildly eccentric, this is a warm movie in cynical disguise, a story that takes a handful of thoroughly modern characters, places them in a classic screwball comedy plot, and lets nature take its course. Created by writer Derek Connolly and director Colin Trevorrow, both first-time feature makers, Safety can't be described in any way that's as enticing as it is to experience. Because nothing plays out as anticipated, this off-balance project comes fully alive on screen in a way a written summary can't capture."
First, I would like to know, does Mr. Turan have a list of the other greatest classified ads of all time?
They've all been on headlines with Jay Leno.
Right. And a classic screwball comedy plot? Like,
No.
what? Like, uh-oh. Turns out I went back in time to meet my girlfriend, and look who's there. Another one of my girlfriends. How am I going to keep them apart? Zoinks! I don't think that's a classic screwball plot. And also, I didn't need to throw Zoinks in there because this isn't a Saved by the Bell reference.
No. I mean, I guess the screwballness of it theoretically could be the idea that Darius, Aubrey Plaza's character, is trying to, juggle her two positions, keep Mark Duplass from finding out that she's a reporter or whatever. But there's not there's no like farce. There aren't really very many moments, if any, where she has to like scramble to hide or things like that, or, change clothes or something to avoid being discovered or something like that. Like, this isn't a funny movie. I don't think it's even really intentionally a funny movie. It's not just that I didn't laugh at it. I don't think it's meant to have jokes, I guess. I don't know. Jason, you're the comedy expert.
Actually, the comedy expert's me. So, a little later, Carrot Top will be out showing off some new props. So, no, I mean the jokes are in the dialogue, right? Like, they definitely have certain scenes that are just specifically there, like when Darius, the Aubrey Plaza character, like has dinner with her dad, played by Jeff Garlin, and he's just like, you're a virgin. Oh, how do you, what? Like, you don't know what I did when I was at college. Yes, I do. I called your roommate Allison, or whatever like that.
Is that a joke?
It tried to be. I mean, there's no point in that scene otherwise. And then,
there's no point in that scene. You can end your sentence there.
No. And then, of course, like the Duplass character has, like I was telling you, like those cutesy lines, like, you're not jerking me around. Jerking people around is for jerks. And I'm like, it's just too cutesy for me sometimes.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. It felt more cutesy than funny, that I would love to know, like, are people really laughing out loud at this movie because they enjoy the humor of it? I don't know. Maybe they
You mean LOLing?
Is anyone LOLing at this film? Let us
Does
know.
anyone say it anymore?
So on the mildly critical angle, this is what I found. Owen Gleiberman in Entertainment Weekly said, "From Lars and the Real Girl to Harvey, there's a noble tradition in movies of folks who are gently off their rockers, characters who invite the audience to fall in love with their cuddly, cracked, quote, innocence. So it is with Kenneth, a supermarket worker in the Pacific Northwest who plans to travel back in time. He also thinks that the government is after him, but these textbook traits of schizophrenia are treated by the movie as glorified sitcom quirks. The best thing in the film is Aubrey Plaza's goldfish-eyed cynicism as Darius, the intern who's just jaded enough to go along with Kenneth's paranoia. Safety Not Guaranteed is a fable of, quote, redemption, and it's too tidy by half, but it is also very sweetly told."
It's so weird that everyone loves this movie, Josh. So look, Aubrey Plaza, huge star now. Like we knew this back then. Like you could watch this and be like, she's just gonna take over. Like, and we've all been watching and enjoying her ascent. And now she can pretty much do whatever she wants, right? So
Yeah.
that was one of the nice things about this, seeing a
Mhm.
great, one of her many great performances. So I'll take that.
Yeah, I like her too, but I do feel like also she's sort of ill-served here. And when he says that he likes that her character is cynical, I feel like it's not, and that's sort of the disconnect, is that that's typically what she plays, and that's kind of how she comes across most of the time. But this is the character who's the least cynical, who's the most open to the craziness of this guy. Jake Johnson is the character who's completely cynical about everything, and she's the one who's like, no, let's open our hearts to time travel and this crazy person who's attractive somehow. I don't.
I don't know either. I mean, she, because there wasn't like maybe, the classic journey of like cynical to like, no, now I see, like,
Right.
I don't think that was really done well either. So,
No, she's really kind of into him from the beginning. And even though we get that like little monologue of hers at the beginning where she's interviewing for a job at a restaurant or whatever, and that's meant to show you how cynical she is, but that all completely has dissipated even when she first meets Kenneth there in like the grocery store or whatever.
yep, it sure does, Josh.
So, Jason, you and I saw this movie together when it was in theaters, I guess.
And usually I have to remind you of this, but since you went back and looked through every old email we ever sent one another,
I was just
you were
looking
able to
and
find this out.
I was looking to see if I had written anything about this movie. And so I did search my email and found a message about us going to see this in an afternoon one day. So we were excited to see it, obviously.
I was definitely excited to see it. I will, when I like had a hot minute in Hollywood, probably like 2009 or so,
Mhm.
I remember my managers and agents were like, well, what kind of career do you want to have? Right. And at that point in time, everyone was like, every comedy person was like, I want to be the next Seth Rogen or whatever. Right. And even back then I was like, I think I would like to have like a Mark Duplass type career, or like really put it in this indie world and like doing, kind of making movies and acting in cool movies. And this was before like, 3 years before the year of Duplass that we're doing right now. Right. So like, even back then I was like all about that. And so when of those three movies that we mentioned, of the three previews, this is the one that excited me the most, right? Like it looks like such a cool idea and it's got this cool indie cast that I all like. And I just remember going like, I don't know what happened. And then I guess this would be more for the next segment, but man, Act 3 is a totally different movie than the first two acts.
Yeah, I mean, and I don't remember specifically how I anticipated all three of these movies, but it's possible that I felt the same way, that I would have anticipated this one the most. I definitely typically like this kind of marriage of like character-driven dramedy and genre elements. There are a lot of movies like that I really enjoy. And at the time, I probably wasn't super familiar with Lynn Shelton as far as Your Sister's Sister goes. I might have been more excited about Jeff Who Lives at Home because I did really like the movies that the Duplass brothers had directed prior to that. But I think, again, yeah, both of us clearly were going to see this eagerly. And I think we were probably both let down at that time and continue to be let down. Dave, did you see this when this came out?
So I hadn't. So like you guys, I really like the other two picks that were in the audience choice poll. But yeah, unlike you guys, I was kind of rooting for this because I had heard so many good things about it over the years. But I didn't like it either. It's very bad, actually.
Right.
You know who else didn't like it was Gina. So much so that she ran into the Popcorn and Puzzle Pieces Facebook group and posted about how much she hated this.
She was so out. Like 20 minutes in, she was done.
Oh man, so she didn't even watch the whole movie?
She got on her phone. I mean, she kind of saw the rest of it, but
in the background there, yeah. That's fair.
Hey Josh, let me ask you a question because you're talking about movies like this that you like.
Oh, now you're going to ask me to come up with one and I'm going to
Yeah,
fail.
Of course I am. The audience needs to know, Josh.
Yeah, no, and that's a fair question. I can't off the top of my head think of one, but I'm sure that if you want to give me a moment,
A little later, Josh Bell will be here telling us about genre movies with romance elements in them.
Yeah, I mean, not necessarily romance elements, but just films that are more character driven, that aren't about like the spectacle and the special effects. And for a while, actually, I was writing sort of this column spotlighting underrated sci-fi movies, and a lot of stuff that I worked in there, I think, was in that area. Riley Stearns, the filmmaker who made a movie called Duel last year. I feel like his stuff is in that realm. Faults, his first film, was one that I wrote about there. Dave Made a Maze is a weird little genre piece, but it's, made on a tiny little budget.
How about Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind? That's
absolutely that's a more
one.
well-known film that fits in that area. So
Little Fish from a couple years ago is another good one too.
Yeah, Little Fish was good. Colossal with Anne Hathaway and Jason Sudeikis, which is a movie I really love. That's like a perfect example of this. So there you go, Jason. I thought of stuff.
Yes, you sure did, Dave.
Hey, I just named like 4 movies.
Give Dave a little credit.
No, Dave did. Yeah, I mean, Eternal Sunshine is one of my favorite movies of all time. So good on you, Dave, for coming up with that. But do you have any examples of that, Jason? Is that the kind of thing that you like?
I do like stuff like that. I mean, I guess Palm Springs kind of counts for me.
Totally.
Sure.
So
yeah,
stuff like that. I mean, we just saw this with Meet Cute, which didn't execute as well, I feel like. But yeah, I mean, obviously I love Eternal Sunshine also, but Science of Sleep, I would say. So another Gondry movie. But yeah, those would be 2 right there. Palm Springs and Science of Sleep. Those are 2 good ones.
Those are both really good. And I was like the lone defender of Meet Cute. And maybe we'll talk about that director later because he's worked with Mark Duplass multiple times. But yeah, all of those, literally, we just named like 8 to 10 movies that are way better than this that you should go watch all of those instead.
Whew, we're really taking it to this probation-ridden audience of ours.
Yes, indeed. So is there anything else related to the background of this film you want to talk about, Jason?
I think you mentioned a lot of it, Josh. Did you ever read Backwoods Home magazine?
I did not. I did look it up online yesterday just to see if it still is in existence, which it is. And it's, you said the idea that the publisher or whatever, the editor who put this fake ad in thought, oh, obviously people are going to know it's fake. But it's this like survivalist magazine. I feel like the audience for this magazine is totally the kind of people who would believe that someone has built a time machine in their garage.
Yeah. Now, if you could, where would you go back in time to, Josh?
I don't know. Would it be like, is there something in my life that I want to correct? Or maybe I would just go back and see like, Led Zeppelin in concert with John Bonham or something like that.
It's fun. Cool. It's funny you say that because my brother always says he would go to 78 and which is like our favorite Springsteen tour, the Darkness tour. And then meanwhile, Debbie Harry's like at her like hottest at Blondie and everything like that. And you got all this cool punk music, the Clash and everything, and the Ramones. So, it's interesting, Dave, I know you would spend a midnight in Paris.
Sure. Why not?
Dave's going to go back and play early video games.
Well, actually, it would be the 80s to go see The Cure, maybe Head on the Door era. So
all right,
nice.
We're all going to go to concerts. That's our
yes.
Yeah, we don't have much hope of like doing something for the world at this point.
None of us want to kill Hitler. So.
Right. No, well, as they say in this movie, and is often the case in many time travel movies, like you, even with the best of intentions, you can't go back and change things because it just screws everything up. So
right.
No killing Hitler. Just go sit in the audience at a concert and don't talk to anyone. I think that's what you got to do.
Yeah, no human contact of any kind.
Totally. That's why I love it. We'll come back in a moment and talk more of our general thoughts on Safety Not Guaranteed. Welcome back to Awesome Movie Year in this season finale of our season on the films of 2012. We are talking about the Audience Choice Poll winner, Safety Not Guaranteed, which some of you out there must really like, but none of us do. So suck it.
Hey, I like this new aggressive, Josh. Maybe after we all watched it and realized we felt this way, we should have had an audience member come on and give us a defense of this film. But like I said, like to me, it's like a totally different movie in the third act. I didn't mind the reveals leading to it, but I felt like the execution afterwards didn't work. There were certain things that were unclear. I thought it was too cutesy, like I said. And then, like I love Mark Duplass. I didn't really love this character at all. And Jake Johnson, who we know is a very good comedy actor, that character is quite hateable.
Yeah, and I don't know that he's meant to be hateable either. And that I think is the big problem. Like if he was the villain of this in some way, then it would be okay that he was this total douche. But I feel like his whole storyline, which they devote a shocking amount of time to in this film, where he's come to this town, he's using the excuse of them doing this article about the weird guy with the time travel ads so that he can look up this woman that he had a fling with back when he was a teenager and hook up with her. And we have this whole storyline of him on his own where he goes and he finds her. And then Jason, as you mentioned, he's like, oh, she's fat and ugly now, which like is first of all wrong. And second of all, like terrible for him to say. And just this is the guy that we're supposed to root for. And then they get together and we have a whole I don't know.
But look, I noticed at least a couple of just sloppy errors in this movie, right? And that's one of them because, he's like, oh, I'm going to look up this woman. But then she says like, hey, I was really excited when like I found you on Facebook or like we linked up on Facebook. So it's not like he didn't see what she looked like now.
Well, no, they do specifically say there's a scene with him and Karan Soni's character where he says, oh, I found her on Facebook, but she doesn't have any pictures.
Oh, well, then I'm wrong on that one. I'll take the heat. But I'll give you another example, right?
Yeah.
When they find out that Kenneth has kind of made this whole thing up about his ex-girlfriend dying, and then they like track her down. And it's Jake Johnson's character. He tells Kristen Bell, like, hey, this is what's going on. We found her. We're going to go interview her, right? And then they're in the car and she's like, I'll go do the interview, right? I'll go do it. And then she gets to the door and Kristen Bell's like, oh, hello, Darius. Come on in. Like this person who has never met or knows about this other person. The way it's set up is like, Darius, even though we just revealed all this information to you, you've already spoken to her and she knows you're coming to interview her. Like it's just sloppy,
Yeah, I mean, the entire depiction, and this is like something that would be not that big a deal if it were a better movie, because there are plenty of good movies that are terrible depictions of journalism and extraordinarily inaccurate, and they're still enjoyable to watch. But the fact that I'm not like engaged in the plot just keeps making me think about how unrealistic the whole depiction of journalism here is in this magazine, where they're paying for 3 people to go stay in a motel for like a week to investigate some little story that's probably going to be a 300-word blurb in the latest issue of this magazine. And every so often, the boss, played by the great Mary Lynn Ricecub, who doesn't get much to do here.
She doesn't have much to do with
all. No. And every so often, she's like, so what's going on? Oh, all right. Just keep me posted. And she's supposed to be like the hard-ass boss who's writing them or whatever.
So, Josh, 2 questions. One, this was 2012. Is it more believable at this time that a magazine would have sent 3 people to, a weekend getaway, drivable? Is that more believable back then?
I mean, it's more believable then than it is now. But even then, I don't like, unless they were the New York Times or something, and they're supposed to be like
Seattle Alt Weekly or
Seattle
something. Seattle Magazine.
Yeah, like a monthly city magazine type thing, which is something that there are very few of those in existence anymore. Yeah, I doubt it. Maybe, again, if it was like, this is our cover story, or this is like a huge investigation that's going to, bring down the corrupt politicians who run our city or something like that. But for the little quirky story about some weird guy, no, absolutely not.
I mean, I guess you could say like, hey, in the pitch meeting, they had no other pitches, right? So they were like, we'll go all in on this.
We're just going to have the whole magazine issue be devoted to this one.
When I used to write for Vegas magazine, I was never sent anywhere. And we had even talked about like how to do travel coverage. And then they were like, no, there's just
Right.
no money, so.
Yeah, I mean, that was as a freelancer, and this guy is, I mean, this is really in the weeds here, but like, the character, Jake Johnson's character, is meant to be on staff. And when I was on staff at Las Vegas Weekly, theoretically, there were potential for expenses. But I remember, Jason, when you and I went to Sundance and I was writing an article, interviewing a local filmmaker from Vegas who had a short film in Sundance that you had an acting role in.
Thank you for mentioning that. I was going to make sure that you did if you didn't.
Right.
So.
But the point being is that this was a legit reason for the publication. It was an article that was as a like small feature story. And I remember, Jason, we stayed in Salt Lake City and had to drive like an hour and a half the morning of Sundance because that was the most money that I could get for a hotel room like an hour away that we had to share,
Yes.
And that I remember took a battle to get them to pay for that.
Yeah, I didn't know all the backroom machinations there, Josh, but I do remember that. And we saw the Patti Smith documentary in Salt Lake City the night before as a satellite it was part of Sundance. So that was interesting that they were running things in both Salt Lake and Park City back then. Josh, you said that there are plenty of journalism movies that get the whole thing wrong but are still enjoyable. Want to name one or two?
You're gonna make me think of one of those.
Yeah.
I feel like virtually every movie that involves journalists, unless it's like All the President's Men or something like that, unless it's a true story based movie, and even then sometimes they'll gloss over things, gets it wrong. And like, again, I feel like it's okay. I'm sure there are a million other professions that I'm not involved with and don't know very much about that are also misrepresented in films, and it doesn't bother me. So like, again, that's not a problem. If a character is a journalist, tons of rom-coms have characters who are journalists who have similar kinds of things. They have ridiculously large expense accounts, or they can spend 3 months writing one article or things like that are completely unrealistic. And whatever, if it's an entertaining story, I don't really care. I mean, I'm avoiding coming up with an example here, but again, you could name pretty much any movie that involves a journalist character that is a good movie, and it would be unrealistic, and it's fine.
Okay. All right. Way to skirt the question, Josh.
Did you have an example there, Jason?
No, I don't have any examples of anything. But I will say, look, let's talk about some positive stuff. We already mentioned Aubrey Plaza. Great. I will also say I love the scenery in this movie. I am very attuned to that Seattle Pacific Northwest area. Your sister also utilizes it. And it's like, it always makes me want to go there. Maybe me, Dave, and Gina can combine his movie trip of somebody that I used to know and my movie trip of your sister's sister. And we could go do a whole Pacific Northwest outing together off the coasts of Washington.
Yeah, that sounds nice.
Gina really likes that movie too, so she'd be in.
All right. Cool.
Yeah, it does have some nice scenery, and they specifically go to this little town, Ocean View, I think it's called, in Washington, where Mark Duplass's character lives, and there's some nice beaches and greenery and all that stuff. And yeah, I mean, I feel like if that's what you're searching for, if you're watching the movie and you're thinking, boy, do I love the trees, then the movie is not succeeding for you.
Well, yeah, I'm just saying it's like, when you see movies about like the Pacific Northwest or islands, you don't necessarily, if you see an island movie, you don't necessarily think of like the islands off of Seattle. But when you see something Pacific Northwest, it's always set in Portland, Seattle, Vancouver, but these like nice small towns, much like Goonies. They're just wonderful.
Yeah, totally.
I'm trying to think of something nice. The whole thing, like I said, I don't have much else, Josh.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's nicer than really what I can come up with. I mean, I feel like just so many aspects of this movie, like the whole Jake Johnson character, literally everything that he does is just like, I don't even understand. It just feels so misguided. And I said this on Letterboxd. I feel like, is it this movie has aged poorly? Is it that in 2012, the like endearing sort of, intellectual journalist guy could just have a bunch of casual like sexism and racism, and that would be part of his charm, and we don't see it that way anymore? And I mean, I don't think that that's true, but I feel like that's basically what they're doing. Like when he just, tosses off stuff like that, you're meant to be like, oh, what a scoundrel. And it just makes him seem like such an asshole the whole time.
I didn't like the character. What was racist though, Josh?
Well, I mean, just like not like hardcore or whatever, but like in the beginning when they're in the meeting and Mary Lynn Ricecub, the editor, says, yeah, go ahead, you can do this story. And he's like, oh, I want some interns. And the various people raise their hands and he points to Aubrey Plaza and Karan Soni. It's like, oh yeah, I'll take the lesbian and the Indian or whatever. And it's like, it's not, but just the way that he reduces somebody to that description is racist.
Yeah.
Yeah. I didn't take it as racist. I just took him as this kind of like, that type of character is usually like wacky best friend, right? Like who like has a heart of gold, but has no filter. But this guy just was like the catalyst for the whole story and then just was a dick the whole time.
Right. Yeah, I think that's the thing. And it's all sort of under that umbrella of him being a dick. But we're supposed to, I think you're right, is like have the idea that, oh, but he's got a heart of gold, but he does not at all have a
and
they never
gold. They didn't resolve his thing, right? Like, am I wrong? Because like he's gonna chase the woman, then he's not gonna chase her, then he meets up with her, then they like spark and have sex, and then he's like, come back to Seattle, and then she's like, nah, that's crazy, and he's like, no, I'm crazy for caring, right?
Right.
And then they never went back to it, right? Am I forgetting something?
No, you're absolutely right. And then he goes from there and he sort of like fixates on the idea that he's going to get the intern laid, and they pick up these, I believe, probably underage girls outside this like liquor store, and bring them back to the hotel so that he can get Arnaud, the intern, laid, which I guess is implied that it does happen. And I suppose the best they can do is at least imply that he spent the night like sleeping outside and thus he did not have sex with a teenager. But that's like the best we could.
Well, you're hoping, look, they're in that range of legality, I think was, yeah. So I don't think they were like skeezing on like illegal, like they weren't 14 or anything, right?
There you go. That's the best defense that we can.
I mean, what I'm trying to be like, I don't think he was. I don't know what to say, man. Like, like you want me to like, there was the scene where they're at like the football game and they're like, yeah, you're in college and they're in high school, right? So like, of course they want to bang you, right? And hopefully they're all finished with high school and on their way.
That's not what he's implying. He is basically saying, hey, adult intern, go have sex with some underage teenagers because they are going to want it.
I'm going to look at it in a much nicer way where it's like, hey, you're legal, they're legal. You can have sex with them if they want to consensually have sex with you. That's what I'm gonna give them the benefit of that doubt. How about that?
Sure. I appreciate that. I think the fact that this comes up at all is a failure of the movie.
Sure, that might be true. One of many.
Yes. So, Dave, I wanted to ask you about the score for this film because I thought the music in this movie was just dreadful.
Mm-hmm. No, yeah, that was one of the things that I didn't like, along with everything else, along with the bad humor and the bad characters. Yeah, no, I thought the score was very, it didn't work at all for the kind of movie that it's supposed to be. So I don't know.
I read in like one of the things that like in the elevator in the beginning, the lead singer of the Lumineers is on the elevator. And like, I guess, I mean, they weren't famous then, but I was like, man, this movie feels like it should have all been scored by the Lumineers, and that would have been at least a little better, I would say.
Yeah, well, it was scored by the composer, whose name I'm going to look up. Ryan Miller, the composer, is the like lead singer of the band Guster, which is a very similar kind of like twee, folk indie rock band.
Much earlier though,
right? But probably an influence. And Jason, I know you like the Lumineers, but I feel like that moment in music is so like, it feels so dated right now that I feel like this is like the Lumineers of movies.
But that's what I mean. But that's what I'm saying. This does feel dated. And I agree with you. Like, I do like them. But that, of course, that Americana, kind of, we all have harps and, washboards to play. It's like kind of over. But it does feel like it would have belonged here.
Yeah, and I think there are some songs that sound like that. And we, of course, also get the original song that Kenneth has composed about his not actually dead ex-girlfriend, which he plays on the zither.
I hated that scene too.
Let's give Mark Duplass some credit. He played a zither, man. That's pretty cool. You know?
And he had a perfectly serviceable singing voice there. So good for him.
He is I think they had a band back in the day.
Okay,
and he toured with the band and everything like that. So
I did write down my one laugh in the movie was when Duplass says to Aubrey Plaza, "Do you know what Star Wars is?" That made me laugh. Otherwise, none of the jokes landed for me.
I actually thought that was like also a good callback to the scene before where like, you know, they're talking about stormtroopers and the Jake Johnson character doesn't understand that stormtroopers are just like common blue collar workers. I thought that was funny too.
Right. And Karan Soni's character, who is the one who knows the most about Star Wars, which of course is like, because he's like the nerd stereotype guy. But that was an amusing line that after all that, he's like, have you heard of Star Wars? So yeah, I guess we might as well just go ahead and rate this because we don't need to keep harping on its awfulness.
Keep zithering on it.
Yeah, let's just rate it out of 5 time machines and move on.
Okay, cool. I'll go first. Generous. I'm going to give it 2.5.
That is generous.
It is a capable movie with some good performances and that's nice scenery.
Yeah, the scenery.
Sure.
Yeah.
Stars for the scenery. Yeah, I'm going to give it, I think I gave it 2.5 at the time I first saw it. And I liked it less this time. I'm going to give it 2 time machines out of 5. I really just feel like, I also wonder how many people are voting for this based on having seen it in 2012. And I would love for all those people to watch it now and continue to like it. So we'll see. But 2 out of 5 for me. Dave?
Yeah, I'm also going 2 out of 5. And yeah, I was wondering that myself, how many people haven't seen it since 2012.
How would Gina rate this, Dave?
Oh, probably 1.5 at best. So
yeah. I mean, I always want to look back and like watch because I loved Garden State when it first came out, and I actually rewatched it, maybe 10 years ago, and I was like, I still like this movie, and I wonder now how I would feel about it.
Yeah, that is another one that's sort of a cultural moment that has passed in such a way that you wonder. I liked it too at the time, and I haven't seen it since it came out in theaters, so I would be curious on that as well. Maybe when we get to whatever year that was that it came out.
2004, maybe?
There you go. We'll give that a try. But for now, we'll come back and talk about the legacy of Safety Not Guaranteed. Welcome back to Awesome Movie Year. In this season finale of our season on the films of 2012, we are talking about our audience choice poll winner, Safety Not Guaranteed. And since the whole point of the poll was Mark Duplass, I feel like maybe we should start the legacy with the really quite amazing career that Mark Duplass continues to have.
Yeah, though we don't like this film, Mark Duplass is awesome. And I would recommend, obviously, going back to some movies that, of course, we've mentioned probably here and definitely on Piecing It Together, like the early Duplass stuff, the Puffy Chair, Baghead, just those kind of indie, real low budget, micro budget stuff that those guys were doing, and that they were also like acting in, like Hannah Takes the Stairs with Greta Gerwig, that I think was a Joe Swanberg movie, right?
Yeah.
So just stuff like that, and he's great, and he also kind of they changed the way that you're able to have an indie film career because of what the deals that they made with Netflix and how they support other indie filmmakers, and they produce so many things. I like The League. I loved Wild Wild Country, which, The League he starred in as a good, funny TV show, Wild Wild Country. They produced about that kind of cult that lived in Oregon. Also nice scenery up there, Josh.
Perfect
and
for cults.
He's co-writing and starring in a movie called The Knife by former NFL All-Pro Nnamdi Asomugha, I think. Apologies if that's Asomugha, or I don't know. Anyway, I apologize for butchering that name, but he's still working with new up-and-coming filmmakers.
Yeah, I mean, and I think what's cool is that, you're naming different things, and you can name things where he's like something like The League, where he was just an actor, and there's other people who are creating it, producing it, writing it, or whatever. Things where he's just the producer and doesn't appear on screen. He works just as a writer. He works just as a director. I mean, he's done so many different positions, and he moves between those all, it's not like he started as one thing and then went to do another thing and now that's all he does. Like he moves back and forth. I mean, the one thing that he and his brother Jay, which they really started with that they don't really do anymore, is direct feature films. Jeff Who Lives at Home and the Dodeca Pentathlon, which both came out in 2012, were the final films that they directed. They kind of moved into directing TV more. They had a series on HBO called Togetherness that ran for 2 seasons, which I wasn't really crazy about.
Yeah, no, I was going to ask you because I love them and I feel like I should probably have watched that, but I didn't at the time.
Yeah, and they directed, I think, almost every episode of that show, which ran for those 2 seasons. They have another show, an HBO show that ran for 4 seasons, an anthology called Room 104 that I've watched a lot of and I enjoy, and is really like just the diversity of styles in those episodes where it'll go from a sci-fi thing to like a horror thing to a comedy. There's the one episode of it that's a documentary, and it's still all within the format of this anthology. And so I think that really shows the breadth of his approach to different genres or whatever. I did want to mention Alex Lehman, the director of Meet Cute, who worked with Mark Duplass on a couple of movies that I think are really good. Blue Jay with Sarah Paulson and Paddleton with Mark Duplass and Ray Romano, which, have you seen that, Jason? That's like one of the saddest movies I've ever seen.
No, and that's why I avoided it. I mean, Blue Jay is sad enough on its own, you know?
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
But I did like Blue Jay, but I know Paddleton is supposed to be a good film, but it seems like it's a tough one. Everyone says it's sad, or maybe just you, but that's enough for me to be like, I can't deal with this at this point.
Yeah, it is tough, but it's really well done. And I mean, it has a lot of humor to it, and then which is, you know, partly what makes the emotion really hit even more. But, you know, I think he's done so many things that we could just keep naming stuff, but he's certainly someone whose involvement is always intriguing, whether it's in front of or behind the camera.
Yeah, both the Duplass guys, just awesome, right? So
yes.
Also recommend their book that they put out a few years ago. That's a good book that they
is it about like how to be an indie filmmaker kind of thing?
It's like half that, like the chapters go back and forth. Like one chapter will be like, here's how we made our career, and then the next chapter will be like, here's a fun, cute story from our childhood, right? You know, and it'll kind of be like a mix of like, I mean, like they're sentimental, but they seem very sincere in their sentimentality.
Yeah, I think that's actually probably a good description of the style of Mark Duplass as a creator as well.
We're always excited for what the Duplass brothers will do, and hopefully there's a lot more good stuff coming from them.
Yes. So this was the debut feature for both Colin Trevorrow, the director, and Derek Connolly, the screenwriter, who were collaborators prior to this and continue to collaborate together. And Colin Trevorrow really has had this notorious career. I mean, thanks to the success of this film, he jumped really over several levels, it seemed like, to go from this to then directing Jurassic World was his second film. And that movie was a huge success. I don't think it's very good, but it was a big success. He continued to be involved with that whole trilogy. He didn't direct the second film, but is a co-writer on it. And then he returned to direct the third movie, Jurassic World Dominion, which is just absolutely awful. But again, made a whole lot of money. Was at one time set to direct the third movie in the Star Wars sequel trilogy, which he eventually left and was replaced by J.J. Abrams. But weirdly, like because of the reception to that film, the J.J. Abrams version, The Rise of Skywalker, that a lot of people didn't like, when the script that Colin Trevorrow and Derek Connolly had written for their version of it leaked online, a lot of people liked that a lot more.
I did. Yeah, I don't know. I didn't read that script, and I didn't love that movie. So, you know, I could see that. But, you know, this was at that time when that was becoming like a thing, right? Like all these kind of like directors who make like one indie get swallowed up by Marvel or this or that. Like he's one of the names you associate with that. Like, oh, cool, one indie, and now we're doing like a big budget franchise thing. But he seems to have come out all right with it. And I did not see his other indie. What is it? The Book of Henry.
Yeah, which is, I mean, that was less of an indie. I mean, it wasn't a big blockbuster franchise movie, but it was certainly a wide release supported by a studio. And I haven't seen that either. I kind of wanted to, because that has become one of these like notorious bad movies. I mean, it has a whole following at this point of bad movie lovers. And if we ever, covered that year, 2017, that would be a prime candidate for like our flop episode, because it did fail at the box office and is just so renowned for being so incredibly awful. Like I'm curious to watch it.
Could that also be a cult classic, Josh?
I don't know if it has a genuine appreciation enough to be a cult classic, but it might get there eventually. I'm not sure.
Yeah. Well, I would be happy to cover that year on this show, but you and your rules, Josh. Yes. You and your rules.
Well, maybe in a few years from now, we'll be able to do it.
All right.
He has a couple upcoming projects that, may or may not happen. He's supposed to make a film called War Magician, a true story about a magician who used illusions to defeat Nazis during World War II. That's meant to star Benedict Cumberbatch, and has also signed on to direct Atlantis, which I assume is going to be some big budget, special effects-y thing about the lost kingdom of Atlantis. But both of those in development in various phases may not actually happen.
I mean, they sound like, for his skill set, like good fits. So, maybe he'll hit a home run.
Yeah, maybe. I doubt it, but we'll see. And Derek Connolly, in addition to collaborating with Colin Trevorrow, has also done well in big Hollywood stuff. Wrote Kong Skull Island, wrote Detective Pikachu, wrote Monster Trucks, which is perhaps on a slightly lower level, but all of these big special effects driven films that he's managed to get writing work on.
Well, we obviously have to cede the floor to Dave, because you mentioned something about King Kong. So Dave,
yeah, how is that one as far as King Kong? I kind of liked that one, I remember.
Yeah, it's good. I mean, it's hard to make a King Kong story that's not just a retelling of the first movie. So he did a good job.
Yeah, and the director of that movie, Jordan Vogt Roberts, is another one of these guys who made like one little indie sensation and became a big blockbuster guy.
Yeah.
Dude, come on. Let's do another, Kings of Summer, right? Was his movie?
Yeah.
Dude, I would love for him to come back and do something indie again, but
he does the King Kongs of Summer now.
A little later, Josh Bell will be out here with his newest stand-up routine, puns on movies.
Yeah, that's the best I can manage. Do we want to talk about Aubrey Plaza, who is like a huge celebrity right now? I mean, she's everywhere and is great. Like, she deserves to be everywhere.
Yeah, I mean, we love her, dude. So, I mean, White Lotus has kind of even jumped her up even more. As you know, I was a big fan of Emily the Criminal last year. Mm-hmm. And the thing about, and Josh, we can't go without mentioning she'll be in Megalopolis.
Right, along with everyone else in Hollywood.
Yeah. It's a rule. We have to mention Megalopolis or Asteroid City. Or Argyle on every episode now.
Oppenheimer, I think, too, right? We kept talking about.
Mm-hmm. But she does a lot of voice acting. Josh, of course, loved her as the voice of Grumpy Cat.
Yes.
In the Grumpy Cat film. But, Scott Pilgrim, the anime coming out, we're going to see a lot more of the voice acting stuff, too.
Yeah. And she's really like, I feel like what's cool about her is that she's branched out into all these different kinds of movies while retaining her essential persona. I mean, she's in that Guy Ritchie movie recently, Operation Fortune, with, Jason Statham and their, globe-trotting action stuff. And she's still Aubrey Plaza in it. And I kind of love that, like in the Grumpy Cat movie, where you watch her and you're like, I'm not sure if she's just playing a sarcastic character or she's like sarcastically appearing in this movie, like as a joke, but either way it works.
Yeah. I wanted to go back to Trevorrow for one minute, because as a writer, he is also attached to the Metal Gear Solid movie. Dave, you like that video game?
It's not really my thing, but huge game, and I'm sure it'll be a big movie when it comes out.
And then he's doing one that sounded fun to me called Intelligent Life, where I think like a guy meets a woman and it's like a rom-com where she might be an alien. If I'm not mistaken, that sounds like it could be fun. But
yeah, that's sort of in this wheelhouse of all those movies we were naming at the top of the episode, really, and hopefully that'll work.
Has anyone ever seen the Dodecacathlon? That's the one Duplass brothers movie I don't think I've ever seen.
No, I haven't. And that was one where they made it. It came out in 2012, but they had made it like 5 years earlier or something, and it was on the shelf for all that time. But I'd like to see it. I haven't gotten around to it.
Yeah, I'd like to do that as well. Jake Johnson, who we did not like in this movie, is doing great and is a very funny actor. This just wasn't a good one, I think, for him. But, he's both him and Karan Soni are in the Spider-Verse movies, right? And for better Jake Johnson kind of leading man work, I'd say go watch Drinking Buddies.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of 3 movies that he made with Joe Swanberg, who we brought up earlier. I like Drinking Buddies a lot. Win It All and Digging for Fire are the other 2 that they made together. And I feel like that's actually like this interesting, almost like trilogy about kind of people coming of age too late in life sort of stuff.
Yeah,
so
30 somethings who can't get their shit together, right?
Exactly. And he is great in all of those. And I think by the time they got to Win It All, which is the 3rd one that they did, he's also credited as the co-writer of that, along with Joe Swanberg.
Yeah, he's doing a lot of writing. It looks like there's a movie called Catalina about like a woman who runs for a small town mayor, but like has doesn't know what she's up against type thing, and another movie called The Henchman. So we'll see, but a lot of voice acting and a lot of writing lately for him.
Yeah, and his directorial debut, which he also co-wrote, called Self-Reliance, premiered at South by Southwest just a month ago or so, and I think got some pretty good reviews. And I also want to shout out TV-wise. I mean, of course, everyone knows New Girl, but I really enjoy him on Minx, which got dropped by HBO Max, but thankfully picked up by Starz. So I'm looking forward to the 2nd season of that.
I didn't know that got picked up. So
yes,
hooray, Minx!
I will non-sarcastically hooray for Minx.
I haven't watched it, so I'm not just dogging it. I just so. And Karan Soni working constantly as well. Miracle Workers, Deadpool, Spider-Verse.
Yeah, he's always fun to see. He did a show called Other Space that was like a sci-fi comedy that I think is underrated. I don't know where you can watch it now. It was on Yahoo Screen, that.
Right.
But it was created by Paul Feig, and I thought it was really, really a fun, underrated show. So worth watching.
Hooray, Yahoo Screen.
Yeah, no, definitely no hooray for Yahoo Screen. But
tried.
And finally, Backwoods Home Magazine still being published.
I know, we're excited about that.
Yeah. You want to learn how to like live off the grid and which firearms to use to hunt for your food. That's the magazine for you.
There are plenty of people who want to know that information, Josh.
There are indeed. So on that note, that is Safety Not Guaranteed. That is this episode and the season of Awesome Movie Year. As Jason said, come yell at us about why we're wrong about this movie on social media and online.
AwesomeMovieYear.com, Awesome Movie Year on Facebook and Instagram, Awesome Movie Pod on Twitter. I'm Jason Harris Comedy or Jay Harris Comedy on all the socials. My website, Go for Jason. Again, we're looking for it with our time machine, have yet to find it. But you can go to eatthiscomedy.com or eatthiscomedy on Instagram. And of course, Josh, Go for Jason as a letterboxd, personality is just on fire.
Totally on fire. My website, also not much going on there, joshbellhateseverything.com, but Josh Bell Hates Everything on Facebook, Signal Bleed on Twitter, and at Signal Bleed on Letterboxd. More stuff to check out there. And you can listen to our producer, David Rosen's awesome podcast, Piecing It Together.
Check out Piecing It Together wherever you listen to podcasts. Follow us on social media at Piecing Pod and join our Facebook group, Popcorn and Puzzle Pieces.
Which soon to be possibly the exclusive place for voting in these audience choice polls, it looks like, depending on what crazy thing Elon Musk does next on Twitter. So we'll see how that goes.
Mm-hmm.
Jason, what are we doing in our next episode?
Josh, we can't leave 2012 without an epilogue telling everyone what we missed, what we were thinking about, and what we might do as a bonus at some point in time. So it's the epilogue 2012.
Yeah. So tune in next time for the 2012 epilogue. And thanks for listening to Awesome Movie Year.
Thank you for listening to Awesome Movie Year. Make sure to follow Awesome Movie Year on Facebook, at Awesome Movie Pod on Twitter, and at Awesome Movie Year on Instagram. And if you like the show, review us and rate us with 5 stars on Apple Podcasts.
An All Points West production, produced by David Rosen in Las Vegas.